just figured I'd show you the before real quick before we actually start taking stuff off. So this is my current ride height. So that's pretty good. Honestly, I'm not looking to drop it much on the front. And then this is the rear. This is more so where I'm looking to get a little bit more low than quad tips do. Woo! That's currently where I'm at here on the ride height on the rear and the front. All right, step 1, done. Get the car in the air. Step 2, get the wheels off. Got some new front tires on. Look at these things, so good. All right, so next I'm gonna pull the sway bar end link off. Hopefully it comes off. There we go, that was not too bad. Because they can free spin, so bam. Move that off to the side. So these 2 bolts on the strut come off. To do the strut bolts, you're gonna wanna have a wrench on one side or a ratchet, and then you'll hit it off or loosen it the other way, because you need to brace one side so it doesn't just free spin. Forgot to point out before pulling the strut too far off, there's this bolt right here. It sits on the back, holds the brake line and the ABS sensor. You just wanna take that bolt off, and then this little tree tab, pull that out so that that's free, so that doesn't get tangled or anything. Now with that bolt loosened and free, you can see the whole wheel hub assembly, steering knuckle, everything is loose. So you just want to make sure and have it or be ready for that so you can support it when you pull this bolt out. Otherwise it could drop and damage something. Now before we go any further with that strut, being able to pull it out, you do need to pull the 4 strut mount bolts off. And if you have a strut tower brace, pull that off as well. Once those are loose, I would recommend leaving 1 or 2 threaded just a little bit so that it doesn't free fall once it is broken free on the bottom. The bolts are loose and the bolts on the bottom are loose. This whole wheel assembly, I'm moving it with my foot. You can see I can raise it. So that's why you want to have those bolts there, just because, so nothing bad can happen. Let's loosen the bolt on the other side and we'll pull the strut tower bar off. Once we disconnect the last bolt on here, I've just got it there to support. I've got a jack stand under the wheel hub so it doesn't drop, and then I will use a bungee cord to kind of support it from the top end. Cool. So that's that. So now that that's supported, we can go up top, loosen these 2 last nuts, carefully pull the strut up. Voila! There you have it. So the only difference between lowering springs and coilovers at this point is essentially you just need a spring compressor to compress this spring on a stock setup so that you can get this nut here off of the strut mount. So compress the spring, get that off, put the new spring on, reassemble. So we're more or less done with the uninstallation process of the front struts and springs. So it's the same thing on the other side, and I'm gonna do that, and I'll pick the camera back up once I get to the back to it so I can show you that process. Look what arrived. Got the coilovers. All right, dude, I am pumped. So let's open this up a little bit. I started to open the box, but I didn't do much more than that. Woo! Oh man, these are pretty. So right from the get-go, that's another, what, 2 inches or something. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to change the height before these even go on. All right, so I got the other strut off on the other side, and I'm gonna start. I mean, the same way it came out, but you've got right up there, so you can see it's got camber adjustment in it, and so I'm gonna start by adjusting the ride height. And to do so, just to make sure that I've got everything set the same, I'm not gonna touch the top ring assembly, because that's kind of how you set the preload, and they come preloaded, so that one you don't touch. Or the one right below it. But I got my caliper to make sure I have very precise measurements, and I'll show you how to change the height on the coilover assembly. So you just take your spanner wrench, break it free. Now you've done that, you can loosen that, and just spin this to make it taller. So I'm going to try and make this more or less the same height as the slowering spring assembly, just so that I more or less have the same ride height in the front. Okay, so stock strut, I'm kind of relaying the top here to the bolts there. This is the highest setting, and it looks to be like it's just a bit taller than this pre-assembled strut. So I'll just lower it just a little bit to kind of go from there, let it sit for like a week, see where it is height-wise, and then possibly lower it some more once it's settled, once I know for sure where the ride height is at. Okay, so I've got this height set to where I think I'm gonna start with. As you can see, it's got a good amount of thread, so I got plenty of room to drop once I'm done with that. So I've got a caliper tool, and then I'm just gonna measure between these pieces. So I've got 120.3, so I'm gonna do what I can to make sure the other strut assembly is the exact same. All right, so now that I've got both perch assemblies set so that they're at exactly 115 millimeters each, I'm gonna measure from the top of the strut mount to the bottom of the strut assembly to make sure that both assemblies are the same total length so that there's no issues with different settings in preload. Alright, so I got the measurements on the shock body assemblies. Everything matches the exact same. The height of the coilover assembly from top to bottom, as well as the measurements between the spring, or the adjuster rings. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and start installing these back on the car. Okay, so I got a little bit carried away with working, so I kind of forgot to record installing the strut assemblies, but I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's my recommendation is a lot of times you just have to push down on this to kind of get the control arm to lower, so you make room to get the strut assembly in, and you essentially want to get it started up top. Get one or two nuts on those strut mounts, and then once you've done that, it won't fall on you, so you can kind of get this lined up and get these bolts started, which I've done there. Just bolt everything back up, and that's it. So one thing I will say, I did have some RTR aftermarket sway bar end links, and I had to put the BC Racing supplied end links in because the RTRs were just too long. I'll give you an example. So you can see that's like 2-3 inches too long. So unfortunately, I'm not able to use my adjustable sway bar end links anymore, but it's not like the car gets heavily tracked. So with that, I'm just gonna install the wheel back on, and then we're done on the front. Bam. Now let's move to the back. Alright, so with the rear wheel off, I need to get access to these these lower shock bolts, and as you can see, the sway bar is in the way. So to get access, I'm gonna have to drop the sway bar, one bolt here, and it just is a nut on the other side. So I'll take that, lower the sway bar, then be able to access these shocks. Oh, and it's important to have your axle supported so that when you loosen these, the car axle doesn't just like go flying. Alright, and now that I've got the bolt off on the other side, we're going to lower the axle, and the control arms will stop it from going too low. Alright, now that's as low as my axle is going to go. Hopefully those springs are loose so I can pull them out. And so again, with the axle loose, I can actually push down on it, and you just pull the spring out, so like so. And then to finish disconnecting these shocks, we'll go from the trunk. It is just one nut right there. I think it's like a 13 millimeter bolt. So I zipped off those two bolts, and this should just pull out. Whoop, yep, there we go. And there's our shock. With those springs out, I've got the new ones opened up, and the perch assembly right here, and went ahead and got the measurements all set so these are even. This goes on the bottom. Spring will go up on top of the axle like so. Now we just got to get the shocks, those installed, and then we can jack this axle up, set a little bit of preload, and bolt the shocks in, call it a day. So one thing to note when you're doing these coilovers, you do have to pull this bushing, this piece right here, and washer thing off of the struts that come off the car. Got them back installed with the adjusters on there, so you can see the shock assembly here. Now that these are installed, we just got to start jacking the axle back up so that we can get the preload properly set. Okay, I couldn't record while taking measurements, but I've got the preload set. The spring assembly started at like right at 11 inches in height, and I compressed it to 5/16 lower, so I don't know, whatever that is, 10 3/4-ish inches, somewhere around there. I know it's not exact. And now that I've got the preload set, now I just take the height of the shock and extend it so that it lines up with this bolt right here. There we go. Put that loose end and spin it to extend. Wasn't exactly able to show you the process again, but because my my jack's a little tired, so it sags. So I got the other side preloaded, and then I did this one as quick as I could. And then when I went back to measure it, I measured from the top of this hat right here down to the bottom of the collar ring, and this one had dropped about 3/16 of an inch. So I ended up having to, what I ended up doing was I just took a measurement on the other shock and then made sure that it was the exact same length right here. So that way my preload should be the exact same on both sides. And that's pretty much it. Just got to reconnect my sway bar and we'll drop the car down for the first time. Look how bad these rear tires are. Oh man. So, got all the tools out from under the car. Excuse me. That being said, I think it's time for the first drop. I'm really hoping that these fronts compress more than the rears, because I'm gonna be rocking that Aussie California swag. If not, all right. Well, here goes nothing. What is that? Oh my god. So that's definitely gonna have to settle some. These rears are looking pretty good. I went max height just about on the rear, so once that settles, I think that's gonna sit really good, because that's pretty much where it was before, just a little bit higher. Yeah, I just pushed on the rear just a little bit and it's already sitting much lower. The fronts, however, god damn. Pretty easy to adjust them now that they're fully installed and everything. I think what I'm gonna do, so I'm just gonna measure 3/4 of an inch from this to that, and then I will lower it, tighten it down, do the exact same thing on the other side, and make sure that they're even. It is probably a week and a half later, assuming that the suspension is now settled. Obviously the car's in the air. I did go ahead and make my final adjustment on the coilover strut. I still have to make my adjustment on the rear, but before I get to that, I wanted to address the front camber issue. So with a lot of aftermarket coilover setups, you can adjust your camber on the front. And to do that properly, there's access right here on the top of the strut tower, which unfortunately is a small hole. So to do it properly, without pulling the whole strut assembly out of the car every time you make the adjustment, a lot of people recommend you widen the hole. So that's what I'm gonna attempt to do now. We're gonna hope that it works out okay and I don't destroy the car. So you can see I've got all the cardboard set up here. I'm trying to help protect the paint and stuff like that when I start cutting into it. I'm just gonna use a Dremel. Yeah, let's give it a shot and hope I don't destroy it too much. I did get some touch-up paint as well so that I can protect the bare metal once I'm done. Over on the edge, kind of clean up the edge with like some sandpaper type stuff. Use the touch-up paint, call it a done deal, and go from there and I'll show you guys the end product. Alright, so that last scene you just saw, that was actually me working on these coilovers over here. I've yet to finish that. I still want to kind of clean it up a little bit. I've got some touch-up paint that I'm going to use. But that's pretty much the finished install on the coilovers. I'm running 1.7 degrees of camber on the front, and that's about all there is to that. I initially went with 1.1 or, yeah, I think 1.1, and I was talking to the guy at the AM show, and he went ahead and suggested that I actually run a little bit more, because that half-degree camber, you'll feel a noticeable difference, but the tire wear won't be significantly worse. So we'll see after a few hundred miles like how it's looking. But so far, just driving it around, the handling is significantly better. I absolutely love the way that these BC coilovers ride, so I'm really happy with them so far. And just look at that. Oh. Boy, I don't care who you is, this Mustang is sitting hella pretty. Ooh! Just look at it. What? Ignoring the curb rash. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Hopefully you were able to pick up something useful as far as the BC Coilovers install regards, and see that it's not too bad of an install to do. It's just like lowering springs and shocks and struts, but it's easier because it's pre-assembled, so that's one of the biggest benefits. It's just a little bit more time consuming long term, because to get it dialed in the way you want, you gotta adjust it a couple times. Definitely worth it. So appreciate you guys watching. Definitely hit the like button if this video helped you in some way or another. Ring the subscribe bell so you can be notified, and obviously subscribe to the channel if it's the first time here. And that's pretty much gonna do it. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.